normally do, huh? Fancy. All right. So this morning, y'all are in luck, by the way. You don't even know how good you have it, because the 8:30 service, all the screens were not working, right? So I have 2 videos in the sermon today, and I don't have to act them out for you this time. Now you wish you'd come to 8:30, don't you? Yeah, all right. We're continuing. This is our last week of Surprised by Hope, and it's inspired by the book cover that's there on the screen. It's written by N.T. Wright. We heard a little bit about him last week. But today we're talking about reshaping the church for mission. And you're kind of wondering, okay, well, what surprising do you have behind the door this time? Well, I feel like I went to a gathering of pastors a couple months ago, and I was surprised over and over throughout that gathering. It's actually called The Gathering. Isn't that a unique name? The Gathering, okay. And it's kind of like a required attendance thing for all the pastors in our conference. It's when all the pastors get together and we don't necessarily have like a set agenda in front of us. And let's face it, we can't get together on the weekends because we sort of have a gig on Sundays. So we never see each other. So everybody goes and we get together. And every other year we hire somebody to come in and be the speaker, which leaves the off years, we have to figure it out on our own, and we like provide content for each other. So this year was an off year. It was like the first week in February when I went. And they did sort of like a TED Talk style thing. But the real dirty thing I think they did was people could submit names of somebody they wanted to do a talk. So it wasn't you were putting yourself out there and you would do it, but sometimes you got put on a list. I got put on a list. And so I had to give a talk. It's not such a big deal. I mean, pastors give talks all the time, right? But giving a talk to a group of pastors, like preaching to preachers, that's rough, y'all. It's hard. Have you ever had to do that maybe in your profession, in your job? Like you have to teach somebody who's like in your same field. It's really hard. There's a lot of pressure, especially if you're ending up having to teach somebody who maybe has a little bit more experience than you and knows a little bit more. Yeah, room full of pastors. I've only been under appointment for almost 5 years. Yeah, okay. It's a little intimidating. But I'm telling you, I got something out of every person's talk. So there were like 10 people that spoke. And in every talk, there was something that surprised me. So I was going to tell you about this woman who talked. She started out her talk with music. And so she just started playing different tracks, and she made us all stand up and start to dance to the different music, which totally made us uncomfortable. Hello, that's just embarrassing. You got to dance in front of all your peers. No, just kidding. We embraced it. But she was playing all these songs that just, I mean, they're not my jam. They're just not my thing, right? So I was just sort of playing along, and I was getting a little bored. She played the chicken dance. Know what I'm talking about? No. Okay. She's of a different generation than I am, so all of her music was different. There was a little bit of this action going on. All right. So I'm just kind of, okay, exactly like I'm doing right now, just little, oh my goodness. And then she sat us all down, and she started to tell the footprints poem. You know what I'm talking about? The footprints poem where there's like Jesus' footprints in the sand and your footprints and you're walking along, and then all of a sudden, I'm just going to give away the ending. So then all of a sudden your footprints disappear, and in the poem you get so mad, like, what happened there? When, that's when I carried you, is what Jesus says. That's when I carried you. Okay. The thing with preaching to pastors is they've heard it all. So we get bored really easy. Like, this is why you should never preach to preachers. Okay. So I just entered into bored mode, which is really despicable of me, isn't it? Yeah, I just entered into bored mode, but it's so tempting. Don't you feel like that's really tempting? That's like the easy route. You're like, I'm just going to sit back and wait for this to pass. When really, there's no excuse for that, because there's always something interesting, right? There's always some fun to be had in life, hence the first video that we have today.
That was a false start.
Y'all, they're a swim team. and they got a layover at the airport. Look what happened.
Go, Sophie, go. Finish, celebrate. Celebrate.
Okay, this next one's really good. They turned it into a triathlon. Oh. Yeah. That was good stuff, right? Oh, wait, hold on. Not yet. We'll get there. There's more fun to be had. Okay. There's always something exciting or something to create or something new to find. Unless you feel like that's not possible anymore. Has anybody seen The Truman Show? That movie, The Truman Show? It's, what's his name? Jim Carrey, thank you. And the whole basis of the movie is that they take a baby, right, and then they raise it in the context of a TV reality show. But the baby doesn't know, right? That's Truman. He grows up in this like made-up world. It's really a TV set where they just film his entire life, all these hidden cameras and stuff like that. But as you can imagine, it gets harder and harder as he grows up to contain him in that world. And so one day he's like in elementary school and he's standing up in front of his class and everybody's talking about what they want to be when they grow up. And he says, I want to be a great explorer like Magellan and explore uncharted waters and all this stuff. And the teacher has like the map, you know, that you can snap up when you roll it up. And there's the map right there. Oh, you're too late. It's all been discovered already. Snap, done, right? Like, no, dude, you cannot discover anything else. Do you ever get that feeling? Do you ever get that feeling like everything's already been done? Everything's already been explored. I mean, seriously, is it quite possible that I could contribute something that like all the generations and millions and billions of people who have come before me who haven't done before? I don't know. It feels like a pretty slim chance. Do you ever get into that apathetic mode? Or maybe you've had the experience where you have a really great idea. You think of some, gadget or gizmo or process that will fix everything in the world or revolutionize the way that we do things. Have you ever had an idea like that? Maybe you've forgotten it now because you discounted it so quickly, right? Or maybe it won't revolutionize the world, but maybe to do something small, like revolutionize the way we cut potatoes. I don't know, right? Something new, something different, and you just discount it and you say, no, that's a dumb idea. No, I'm sure somebody's already thought of that. And then you're watching an infomercial a few months later, and somebody else had the same idea, but they marketed it and patented it, and they're making a killing, right? Have you ever had this experience? Or is that just Al Gore that has that experience? I don't know. Just kidding. That was a good one. You like that one. Sometimes we step on our own toes and we forget that life is full of creativity and it's full of new opportunities. That's the resurrection. That's Easter. But we can get to this week, it's the fourth Sunday of Easter, and we can forget that Easter's not over, that it continues. Dude, I forgot it this week. I was in the doctor's office, and I'm like checking in for my appointment, right? And the guy who checked in before me, he's taken like a cynical approach to the room, and he looks around, he's looking at all the Easter decorations that are still up. And he turns to the ladies at the reception desk, and he's like, hey, is Easter over? Isn't Easter over? One of those like rhetorical questions. You get what he's going for, right? And I went into like tired, boredom, apathetic mode. I kid you not, because I thought about like everything that leads up to Easter for a pastor, a lot of busy time, a lot of work. And I close my eyes and I go, oh yes, Easter is over, right? But it's not. It's not. So then I tried to backpedal and I was like, oh wait, hold on. No. What I meant was Easter's not over until Pentecost. And they're all looking at me like, what is this lady talking about? What is Pentecost? They don't know I'm a pastor. I'm just looking like a weirdo. But I'm trying to tell them it's not over, because when you let that feeling of, oh, that part's over, I'm just surviving it, I'm just getting through it, I'm going to settle into the boredom, all of that, then you miss out on the truth of the resurrection, right? Is that there's always something new. What if we think of resurrection? We think of Easter as the first day. It's the first day of this new world, of this new thing. John chapter 20 starts out that way, and it's talking about when Mary and the women go to the tomb. It says they go on the first day. It's the beginning. N.T. Wright in the book says, the Word through whom all things were made is now the Word through whom all things are remade. Over and over. That at the center of Easter, there's a challenge to a new way of life, to new forgiveness, new fruitfulness, new following of Jesus. And it'll be wider and more dangerous than what's gone before. It's a call into a challenge of this new resurrection, and it does summon us to dangerous and more difficult tasks on earth. So tell me, what sort of big problems do you see in the world? Nothing, right? There's no big problems. War, yeah. What other big problems do you see? Apathy. Ooh. Trying to find a good president. Yeah, we got our own challenges in our country right now, okay. What other big problems of the world do you see? Just throw them out there. Don't be afraid. Poverty, hunger, disease, global warming, hatred. See, now I got you warmed up. Restoring resources. Oh, destroying resources on the earth, yeah. There are a lot of big problems, aren't there? Do you find some of those things like you thought them in your head, but they sort of get stuck and you're afraid to even voice them? Right? Like, oh my goodness, why even bring that up? It may cause a rift in the room. Oh my goodness, we may not agree, right? It's not even worth trying. It's just going to stir up the waters. We can't solve it anyway, right? And we get afraid of even trying. The problem with that is that we're making a choice. It's not like if we avoid talking about the problems or we avoid looking at the problems that we're not making a choice. No, we're making a choice to avoid, right? And in resurrection, we are given that choice every day to either choose or not choose resurrection, to choose this living of new life. Choosing to live by the resurrection is a game changer, right? It's the kind of game changer that has been changing the world for centuries, for millennia. The joy of living the resurrection can kind of get lost, and we can miss the whole point. Is living by the resurrection harder than not living by it? Living by the rules, not living by the rules. Take the, I think we need the example for this. Okay, so sometimes there's a little bit of jealousy, or there's a certain conversation that happens in the church around the idea of somebody devoting their life to Christ at the end of their life. You know what I'm talking about? When somebody like devotes their life to God on their deathbed, and then there's like a contingency of Christians who say, dude, not fair, right? You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can laugh, that's funny. Yeah. You say Christians who turn their lives to Christ at the very end, well, that's not fair because they've not been living according to Christ their entire life, so how come the payoff is the same? And our pastor's small group was talking about this a few weeks ago, the one that meets at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And they said, you know what, I just want to say to people who feel like it's not fair, dude, you kind of miss the whole point. You miss the whole point. Like you feel like you're missing out on something because you had to live by the rules your whole life. Actually, it's living by this way that Jesus taught us that makes everything so much more meaningful. It makes it so much more worthwhile, right? Okay, so maybe we're not going to solve all the world's problems right here, right now, right? But there are steps that we can take towards living in that more rich, that more joyful way. And so let's tackle just one little problem. You ready? How about something like bullying and loneliness? All right, I give you the buddy bench.
What's a buddy bench?
It's where if you can't find your best friends and you don't know where to go play, you sit on a buddy bench and somebody will come find you and they'll include you in your game.
So what did you think when you saw me here sitting by myself? What did you think?
To come sit with you.
You wanted to be my friend.
Yes.
Have you ever sat on the buddy bench waiting for somebody to play with you?
Yes.
And how long did it take before somebody came and asked you to play?
A minute.
You can find friends easily
when you're lonely and you don't have anyone to play with at recess.
Have you ever sat on the buddy bench waiting for someone to play?
Yep.
Since we've installed them, before I've seen people walking around by themselves, and then once we got these, I seen a lot more people with friends to play with.
Everybody crowd in. Are you ready? Oh, we've got a lot of buddies. Okay, ready? Everybody in? 1, 2, 3.
Yay. Isn't that fun? I'm sure this is only a childhood problem, where you feel left out of the action, right? The buddy bench is so cool, but can you imagine? I mean, it must be really hard to sit down on the buddy bench. Would you be willing to do that? If you were already feeling vulnerable and stuff, would you go out there? Would you sit on the buddy bench? I don't know. It's a little risky. You say, yeah. Some people are like, I don't know. It's a hard thing to sit on the buddy bench. But it's also hard to be the kid that walks up to somebody on the buddy bench, right? Because then you're stepping outside of the group, right? And you're the one that's like inviting a new person in, so you're taking a risk of whether or not you're going to be accepted back into the group. But do you see all the love and the joy and the hope that comes out of it? How beautiful it makes the relationships and how much deeper it takes the kids with one another. Love is the last thing that we need to ration in this world. And that's what resurrection is all about. It's not that, we can only celebrate Easter once a year. Actually, the more we celebrate it, the more we live into it, the more hope, the more joy it creates in the world. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about sort of the Methodist side of this, looking at the resurrection. So John Wesley talked about something that he called practical divinity, and divided up the focus of how to live out the resurrection into 2 areas. The first one is personal piety, and the other one is social holiness. So imagine that like 2 sides to the same coin, is focusing inward or focusing outward. So personal piety, you can probably describe that as, your relationship with Christ, your prayer time, you're studying the Bible, all that inward focus where you're growing closer with God. Right? And your social holiness has to do with the ways that you act out in the world. So service, mission, action, the way you live out your faith. But my question is always like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And I think it's different for each person. Some people start out on the social holiness side, right? And they totally getting out there in the world and acting on behalf of love and peace and hope. And then eventually they come to a point where they start to call that, I'm acting on behalf of the way of Jesus Christ. And that's when their personal piety starts to grow, right? And their prayer life and learning about who God is and the characteristics of God. Or other people start vice versa, the other way. They'll start with the personal and move to the social. It is tough to keep those things in balance. Do you find that? It's tough to keep those things in balance and not be on just one side or the other. Everybody open up your bulletin. The insert that's in there. We always organize our bulletin with the 3 elements of our mission statement: love God, love others, and change the world. And so actually this is a really cool tool that you can use too to see how balanced things are or how things can get out of balance. We tend as a church to rock back and forth. This is funny. So every week we're putting together the announcements and I kind of watch how things shift under each heading. And sometimes we're really heavy on one area and not so much in the other area. Like this week we had to be a little creative in the way that we categorize things, or else, just the format of the paper would have looked really weird. But do you understand what I'm saying? How hard it is to keep things in balance, but how much fuller it feels when you're taking this approach of practical divinity and really exercising these 2 different sides, or in our case, 3 different sides of faith. Keeping it in balance is a challenge. Here's a quote from N.T. Wright from our book. It's a challenge to come alive to the real world. The world where Jesus is Lord, the world into which your baptism brings you, the world you claim to belong to when you say in the creed that Jesus is Lord and that God raised him from the dead. What we all need from time to time, maybe you know this too, is you need for someone, a friend, a spiritual director, a stranger, a verse of scripture, or simply just the prompting the Holy Spirit to say, it's time to wake up. It's time to come alive. You've been asleep long enough. The sun is shining, and there's a wonderful day out there. Wake up and get on to life. So do you want to hear how the footprints thing ended with my friend? Okay, she really did surprise me. So she started telling the footprint story, and that's when I checked out. I went, oh, dude, really? We've all heard this. But she told the story differently. So she started out and she said, okay, so there's Jesus' footprints in the sand, and they're all big and strong and steady. And then there's my footprints, like way over here on the side. And over time, they sort of get closer and closer, and they're walking more in the same path until finally, my footprints actually fit into the footprints of Jesus. And I'm literally like walking in his steps. And at first, it was like my feet were really small. She describes like over time, her feet got bigger so that they actually filled in more of Jesus' footprint. And then, man, they were just totally in sync. And you couldn't tell any difference between her footsteps and Jesus' footsteps. And I'm thinking, all right, this is like the pinnacle of the message, right? There's no better than that. You're totally in sync with Jesus. And she said, but then something happened. I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden my footsteps got all wonky. They just went everywhere. She said they're erratic. There's no pattern to them. They're just like all around Jesus' footprints. And I turned to Christ and I said, I'm so sorry. I failed. I've done something wrong. And Jesus said, no, you didn't go astray. Nothing wrong happened there. That's when we were dancing. Oh, I know. She surprised me. The thing is, in reshaping the church for mission, we do that all the time. We're always doing this dance with Christ because the mission never really changes, right? It's always been go and make disciples. Go tell the good news. Give hope of the resurrection. But other stuff changes, like our culture and our time and the way that we talk to each other, and all of that continues to change. And so we're called to reshape the dance so that we continue living in the hope of the resurrection. We'll continue our worship while we give our tithes and offering.